What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I'm going to be sharing my top 5 best loadouts to use within Warzone. Now for those that missed it, I already did a video talking about what I feel are the top 10 guns based on statistics as well as my personal experience. And I've also done a really detailed comparison of the AX50 versus the HDR in relation to Warzone. So I feel like those videos are both kind of important leading up to this loadout video. But in today's video, I'm sharing what I am personally really liking right now as far as loadouts go for Warzone. Keep in mind, this will likely change and evolve over time as people's playstyles change over time and as we just learn new things about the game or as things get patched. So just because these are my favorite things right now doesn't necessarily mean that I'm never going to be changing these in the future. Additionally, please remember while going through this list, a lot of this is based on preference and playstyle. These are the loadouts that work really well for me and my playstyle. They might not work so great for you. You might want to adjust things a little bit to better suit you and your playstyle. But now that we have those little disclaimers out of the way, let's just start hopping into it. So the first loadout that I have for you guys is with the FAL combined with the HDR, so obviously we've got Overkill on this. And on the FAL, I'm using the XRK Marksman barrel, which helps with both our range as well as our recoil, which is excellent. We've got the GI Mini Reflex on here, the no stock attachment so we can snap on a target a little bit faster, and it improves our overall movement speed so we can get around the map faster. We've got the 30 round extended mag on this, and then finally we've got the Merc foregrip to help cut down with that vertical recoil a bit more. If you've got a decent trigger finger, this thing absolutely decimates people within Warzone, especially if you're hitting headshots. I absolutely love it, and I would even go so far as to say that this is probably my favorite assault rifle at the moment. As for the sniper on this class, we're using the HDR for this one, and with this we're using a tactical suppressor, honestly just because I haven't even leveled the HDR up because I've always been an AX50 kind of a guy. If I had it unlocked, I'd probably be using the monolithic suppressor instead of tactical. But our barrel is going to be the 26.9-inch HDR Pro barrel, which is the longest one that pretty much eliminates bullet drop or really significantly reduces it, which is great. We've got the thermal scope on this one as well because this is designed to really pick people off at extreme ranges, and the thermal scope is excellent for finding people at those ranges. We've got the FTAC Stalker Scout stock on this. That's the one that helps with aim down sight time. And then finally, we've got the 7-round extended mag with this. Like I said, this one's designed for those really long range shots. It's not so much like a close to mid-range sniper, it's all about the long ranges. And that's why it pairs nicely, I feel, with the FAL, which pretty much dominates up close and at mid-range. As for perks, we're going to be seeing a similar trend with all of these classes, so I'll explain it in a bit more detail here, and then I can just kind of gloss over it later on. Our tier 1 perk is Cold-Blooded. Since we're using a thermal sniper and we're going to be sniping at people at really long ranges, a lot of times other people are going to be using a thermal sniper trying to do the same to me, and this is why Cold-Blooded is great with this class because it'll be much more difficult for them to see me. Tier 2 perk is obviously Overkill here, and then finally our tier 3 perk is actually my favorite tier 3 perk within Warzone, and this is Amped. It just allows me to swap weapons really quickly. So if I'm sniping, for instance, and then a team suddenly sneaks up on me or they get close to me, I need to switch to my assault rifle as fast as possible to challenge them. And Amped allows me to do this very noticeably faster than when I don't have Amped. So this absolutely has made the difference between life and death many times for me already. As for our lethal, this is the Molotov. I really like the Molotov within Warzone because it's got a good amount of lethality, it will definitely kill people, but it's more so a great area of denial type of equipment. If there's only one rock towards the end game that a guy can hide behind, if I throw a Molotov around the side of that rock, he can't just jump out of the way quickly and then get back into cover. He is forced out of that cover for several seconds, which should give me plenty of time to finish him off. It's also great if you find yourself in a building, for instance, and somebody puts some damage into you and you're worried they're going to push you and they only have like a narrow corridor to get to you. You can toss that Molotov down within that corridor and get yourself out of that situation, and the enemy can't push you, or if they do, they have to find an alternate route. So I just really like the versatility overall with the Molotov, and this is why you're going to be seeing it on most of my classes as well. This just leaves us with the tactical, which is the heartbeat sensor, and it's always going to be the heartbeat sensor. This piece of equipment is by far the most valuable piece of tactical equipment you can use in Warzone right now, because it's got infinite uses. You can use it whenever you want, it doesn't go away, and it's just so good if you're approaching a building and you want to make sure that there's nobody camping in that building. All you do is pull out your heartbeat sensor and it'll tell you if you've got a guy or a team there, unless they happen to have Ghost. But most of the time, you're not going to run into a full team of Ghost users, and therefore the heartbeat sensor is just so incredibly valuable, and I highly recommend that you use it for your Warzone loadouts. So that's the first one I wanted to share with you guys, and this is one that I tend to select if it looks like I'm going to be doing a lot of fighting in open areas, so longer range sort of engagements. I won't typically choose this if I'm in the downtown area, for instance. But that brings us to the next loadout, which is designed more for those closer range situations while still being very versatile. And once again, this is an Overkill class with a sniper rifle, but this time we're using an MP7 as our primary. Now on the MP7, we've got a monolithic suppressor because we want to stay off that radar. I still find it a little bit strange that we show up on the radar in Battle Royale when we fire an unsilenced gun, but we don't in regular multiplayer. But that's besides the case. It's great to stay off the radar within Warzone, so we've got monolithic suppressor, FSS strike barrel to help with our ranges a little bit, no stock to allow us to stay really snappy and also improve our movement speed. We've also got the frangible disabling perk, which is quite solid within Warzone. In regular multiplayer, it's kind of a useless perk because you kill people so quickly anyways. It doesn't matter if you're slowing them down because they're just dead in the blink of an eye. But when you start factoring armor into the equation, it takes a little bit longer to kill people. So it's nice that with this weapon perk, when you shoot them, you're going to be limiting their movement a little bit, which helps quite a bit with finishing that kill, especially if they're trying to get around a corner. This just leaves us with the 60 round extended mag, which allows me to deal with multiple enemies that have armor without needing to reload between those enemies. Now, moving on to our sniper rifle with this one, this time we're using the AX50 rather than the HDR, and with this we've got the monolithic suppressor, the SynGuard Arms Pro barrel, the tac laser to help with our aim down sight time and aiming stability so we don't have to hold our breath for some of the shots if it's at closer ranges. We've also got the SynGuard Arms Assassin stock, which is the one that helps with our aim down sight speed, and the stippled grip tape. So we're really stacking up on aim down sight time here, while still having a very solid bullet velocity and bullet drop by using that SynGuard Arms Pro barrel. And I just really like using the AX50 with this particular setup, especially for the mid to somewhat longer ranges. I'm not going to be challenging people at extreme ranges with this like I would with the previous setup that I showed you with the HDR and thermal sight. This is designed much more for the mid to somewhat longer ranges. And then everything up close, the MP7 absolutely holds its own with this class setup. Now, the only other thing that's different about this class setup compared to the previous one is double time. I like using this class setup to get around really quickly, help me get my loot as fast as possible. Also, when you're approaching buildings, if you want to crouch walk into a building to keep those silent footsteps, double time is great for this because you get increased crouch walking movement speed. So that's why I really like using it on this particular setup with the MP7. Now, moving on to the third loadout that I'm going to share with you guys. This is my M4 loadout. And with this one, we have it overkilled with a shotgun rather than a sniper rifle. So this one, we are going to be playing mainly closer quarters. But with this particular M4 setup, we can stretch the range a decent amount. We can challenge people at a pretty surprising distance with this and still be dealing some pretty solid damage. So with this one, we're using a monolithic suppressor to stay off the radar, the Corvus Custom Marksman barrel, which is just excellent. It improves our ranges a good amount and helps with our recoil too. We've got a GI mini reflex sight on there, which I just really like that particular optic. The no stock attachment, so we're a little bit snappier at aiming down sight, and our movement speed is improved. And then finally, the 60 round magazine for dealing with those multiple armored enemies. This is an incredibly versatile gun. It holds its own just fine in closer quarter situations, and you can stretch its effectiveness out to a pretty decent distance. Now, as for our shotgun on this class, we're using the R90 with the choke, the Forge Tac Sentry, the 1 milliwatt laser, and frangible disabling. Now, you'll notice I am actually missing an attachment here. This is just because I wanted to recommend the stippled grip tape as well on this. But just like with the HDR, I haven't really leveled the R90 all the way up, so I don't have that unlocked. But I did want to point out, in an ideal world, I would also be using stippled grip tape. As for everything else on this class, I've already covered it in the previous class setups, but I really like using this class setup as well if I find myself in more urban environments, like the downtown area, for instance. Now, the next class setup is pretty similar in utility compared to the previous one, but with this, we're using an LMG combined with a shotgun. And our LMG is going to be the PKM with a reflex sight, the no stock attachment, stippled grip tape, 150 round belt. I'm not going to use the 200 round belt here because I feel like it slows your movement speed down way too much, whereas a 150 round magazine is a nice in-between sort of a compromise. And then finally, the Commando foregrip for our underbarrel attachment, since this does bounce around side to side a bit, and that's where Commando foregrip really comes into play. I find this setup to be excellent at those mid sort of ranges. It can still hold its own up close as well, and you can stretch the ranges out a decent amount, but mid-range is where this LMG really shines. As for our shotgun, this time we're using the Origin 12 instead of the R90, just for a little bit of variety. And with this, again, I haven't leveled it up a ton, so I'm kind of like making do with the best I have at the moment. So we've got the breacher device on there. That's something I would likely swap out once I level this up a bit more. We've also got the Forged Tac Precision Barrel, the 1 milliwatt laser, once again, frangible disabling, so if the enemies are trying to run away from me, if they're within my range, I'm going to be slowing them down a lot by shooting them. And then we've got the 12-round extended mag on this. The Origin 12 is excellent in those really close quarter situations and for clearing rooms with multiple enemies in them. As for the rest of the class, once again, no surprises here, aside from the fact that we have a Semtex instead of a Molotov, and honestly, that's just for variety's sake. The Semtex is also a great piece of equipment to use. I just generally lean more towards the Molotov. Now, we have one last class setup to talk about here, and you might have noticed so far a really big trend is I've run Overkill on every class setup I've shared with you guys so far. And you might be thinking, why aren't you running Ghost? Ghost is a very powerful perk, especially towards the end game, where people are likely to pop UAVs in a very small circle. And also heartbeat sensors, they're going to be really coming out to play. The reason I haven't used Ghost on anything so far is when I play Warzone, I like to have 2 loadouts within a single match. My initial loadout is always going to have Overkill on it because there's just no replacement for having 2 fully decked out and personalized weapons. That is going to be incredibly powerful throughout the game. However, a little bit later on in the game when I can afford a second loadout drop, or if I just happen to stumble across one, that happens quite often as you get into the mid-game situations, this is where my final class setup comes into play. This is my perks class setup, where when I select this, I get the perks from this loadout, and I don't need to use Overkill here because I just drop my Overkill guns on the ground when I switch to this loadout, and then I have the option to pick those up if I would like. So with this, we're using one of my favorite guns within Warzone right now, which is the AUG with the 5.56 conversion on it. So I am using the 60-round drum with the 5.56 NATO rounds. We've also got the monolithic suppressor, the GI mini reflex, the Forged Tac CQB comb, which is the one that helps with aim down sight time, as well as the stippled grip tape to help even more with our aim down sight time. If you guys saw my top 10 guns video, this gun has the fastest DPS out of any of the full auto guns up close. With the exception being the M4 with the SOCOM rounds, but those have a lot of downsides attached to them, whereas this doesn't really have much for downsides. So this is a really nice, versatile gun that I can choose to use for the rest of the match, or if I'm liking how my previous gun was going from the first loadout that I selected, I can just stick to that first gun and I'll drop the AUG on the ground. It really just depends on how I'm feeling at the time. You'll also notice with this, I do have the Joker as my secondary here. And with this, most of the time, I'm just going to be dropping that Joker on the ground for my previous gun, like the sniper rifle, for instance. However, I like to have the option there. Sometimes it's really nice to have a Joker because if you get enemies camping on a rooftop, for instance, the Joker is excellent for taking them out. Or if they're just camping behind a certain piece of cover and using that really effectively, the Joker is incredibly powerful against them. Again, though, I don't really use the Joker too often. It's just there to be an option to continue using if I would like to as I select this second loadout. Now for the perks on this, we've definitely got Cold-Blooded because as you get towards endgame, Cold-Blooded really starts to come into play even more against those people with thermal optics. Of course, we've got Ghost on here so we can stay off the radar, as well as heartbeat sensors in the endgame, which is very, very important. And we do once again have Amped on here, just because I really, really like Amped. And I feel like it just helps me so much throughout a game. Our lethal and our tactical is going to be the same here though. We've got the Molotov and the heartbeat sensor. And with that, that wraps it up for my current top 5 best loadouts to use within Warzone. But of course, like I said, those are just my loadouts based on my preference and playstyle. I'd like to know in the comments section below, what are some of your favorite loadouts and setups to use within Warzone so far? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.